Now, on the subject of Tony Khan, he was in a mood on Friday night when he saw Ariel Helwani pop up on Smackdown as their Canadian correspondent in the crowd, being that he's from Montreal. He also does interviews with WWE talent for BT Sport, and Nick Khan used to be his agent, so Ariel obviously has connections to WWE. And this upset Tony Khan greatly. It all goes back to the interview that Tony gave to Ariel in October, which was not anything connected to BT Sport or anything like that. That was on Ariel's show, on Ariel's personal YouTube channel. He sat down with Tony Khan, he interviewed Tony Khan. And it was an interview that Ariel later, after it dropped, called one of the most frustrating interviews that he has ever done in his entire career. Because a lot of the questions that he asked Tony Khan, Tony would not answer. Mainly the stuff about the Brawl Out incident and the investigation that, alleged investigation that came out of it. Tony said that he couldn't talk about it. And it was to the point where Ariel kept trying to ask him the same thing over and over again, to the point where, even I'm sitting there, watching this and listening to this going, all right, dude, move on. I get what you're trying to do. I get you're trying to get answers here. I've done interviews myself in the past, right? I'm not trying to compare myself to Ariel Helwani, but I've been in that position. You ask questions you want to try to get an answer to. After the second time of asking basically the same question and not getting an answer, it's time to move on. And Ariel just couldn't let it go. And legally, maybe Tony Khan couldn't, or he just legally felt that he couldn't say anything about it. But people forget, it wasn't just CM Punk and the Elite and the incident at All Out that Ariel asked him about and got no answers to. He asked him about Punk and the Elite. Tony said he didn't want to talk about that. He asked him about MJF. Tony didn't want to talk about that. He asked him about Cody Rhodes. Tony didn't want to talk about that. He asked him about Bray Wyatt and any discussions he may have had with Bray. He didn't want to talk about that. He asked Tony what he had for breakfast that morning, and he didn't want to talk about that either. But he was happy to talk about AEW Rampage and what a great show it was going to be. For all the time they spent together, Tony Khan didn't have a whole lot to say, other than how great everything is and how great AEW is. And that makes for a really boring interview. I can understand why he would want to say that and talk about that. He's a promoter, but that makes for a really fucking boring interview. And I said at the time, neither of these guys came out of that situation looking good. Ariel, like I said, kept asking questions he probably knew he was not going to get an answer to, and Tony gave him nothing. If Tony Khan knew that he would be asked about multiple things that he wasn't going to talk about, then he or his PR people should have communicated that to Ariel before the interview. And Ariel came off bad for clapping back at Tony Khan publicly the way that he did, because all he did was burn a bridge with somebody who happens to run the number 2 wrestling company in the world. And somebody he might want to talk to again at some point in the future when Tony actually has something of note to say. And he had a terrible excuse when people pressed him on it for why he never brought up the Vince McMahon stuff in the interview that Ariel did with Triple H last year. That was a very good interview. He talked to Triple H about his near-death experience and being in the new creative position that he's in. And it was a really good interview. But he did not bring up any of the Vince McMahon stuff. Or if he did, maybe it got edited out. I'm of the impression he didn't even ask him about it. And he got a lot of flack and a lot of criticism for that. And his response to that whole thing, which I'm not going to get into, I covered it at the time, but Ariel's response to those people was terrible. He used a Bobby Knight analogy that was just fucking an awful analogy to use. It was something to the effect of, why would I ask the new coach about the indiscretions of the previous coach? Like, who would do that? That's exactly what happened. But again, it was a terrible response. So I thought both of them looked terrible coming out of that whole situation. Ariel also said that if you think the AEW product is better than the WWE product right now, and again, this was back in the summer when he said this, but he said if you think that the AEW product is better than the WWE product right now, you're a liar. Which, that may be true, but that's a weird thing for someone in his position to say. That may be his opinion, But calling somebody a liar if they think AEW is better than WWE, it's a very weird flex for a journalist. Anyway, Tony saw Ariel on WWE television Friday night, and he tweeted, "You're a fraud, Ariel Helwani," and he tagged him. "You're as legitimate of a reporter as Tony Schiavone." And he tagged poor Tony Schiavone, and then he put hashtag AEW Rampage. It was the Rampage hashtag that got me, because this was during Smackdown. It was like 8:30 at night that he tweeted this when he saw Ariel on screen, on a night where Rampage aired early. Rampage did not air at its normal time slot on Friday. It aired at 7 o'clock. So Rampage was already over. But he made sure to get that Rampage hashtag in there. I thought, dumping on Schiavone, he was just having fun with it. When I first saw the tweet, people were telling me about it when I was actually, I don't know how early I noticed it. Actually, I did notice that tweet first. The response from Ariel, though, came when I was already live streaming. But when I saw the tweet, at first I thought he was just having fun, kind of like a wink and a nod. But that doesn't appear to be the case, at least not after what Ariel tweeted back to him after the show. Ariel replied, "Thanks for watching, old friend. Can't wait for our next chat. Also, don't listen to the snowman, Schiavone. You're a legend in my books." Oh my God. Tony did not like that snowman crack, and responded by wishing Ariel luck with the, quote, unbiased journalism. And that's where the conversation ended. Picking fights like this on Twitter is not a good... And I feel like I've said this before. Picking fights like this on Twitter is not a good look for Tony Khan. But it makes for great content for my shows. So if that's how he wants to spend his Friday nights, then be my guest. But this whole situation is just ridiculous. I really did, at first, I really did think that he was just kind of having some fun with it and being a little lighthearted. But when he responded back, it was very clear that Tony Khan was not having fun with this. He was legitimately upset by this entire thing. And then last night, during the Elimination Chamber, Ariel Helwani was shown in the crowd with George St. Pierre, right, the UFC Hall of Famer. Michael Cole was talking over the shot, and he referred to the unbiased Ariel Helwani. And then he had a crack, and I don't have it in front of me, but he had a crack in there about how, he asked the tough questions, even if you don't want to answer them. It was such a dig. It was such a burn at Tony Khan. I can just picture him throwing furniture at home when he heard it. It must have taken every fiber of his being not to tweet his little fingers away when he heard that. Because he heard it. If he wasn't watching the pay-per-view live himself, he heard it very quickly on social media. But Tony was able to control his urges this time, and so far he has not responded to the WWE burn from Elimination Chamber last night. Tony Khan is also going to be making another major announcement on Dynamite this Wednesday. The ratings were down this week, so it's time for another major announcement from Tony Khan. It could be about the Ring of Honor TV launch, but that's already been announced. Maybe it has to do with the Ring of Honor tag team titles, I was thinking, and what he plans to do with them.